So, well, welcome to the show. Why don't we just start off the bat, because even though you are internet famous,
Okay.
maybe there is one or two people left here that have not met you. Why don't you just share with us who you are, what you do, your entire platform, and your mission that you guys are doing over there?
I would love to. I'm going to assume it's going to be more than one or two people, but thank you for your kindness. So hello, friends. My name is Elle Campbell. I am one of the co-founders of Stuff You Can Use. We started as a youth ministry resource company, but in the last few years, we started back in 2010, actually, like making some free resources and like really affordable resources, like kind of one-off games and different event guides and just kind of the things that we wanted for our ministry and that we needed. So we would make them and then just share them with other people. So that's kind of how we got started. But then over time, we decided to get into curriculum. So we started making a youth ministry curriculum that is called Grow Curriculum. We then expanded into kids ministry, and we've got some other things kind of up our sleeves for the coming year plus, which will be exciting. But specifically, like our curriculum, it's called Grow Curriculum, an Annual Strategy. And the fun thing about Grow is it's not just your teaching curriculum, it's actually like your complete year of youth or kids ministry, like in one bundle of things, including how to communicate with and train and engage volunteers and parents. So yeah, it's a whole bundle of fun things.
The gift that you've given tons of churches across the country, if not more than our country, I think is just amazing. Seeing how you guys have developed that system. And what I love from an entrepreneur's point of view is that what you've done is you've taken almost like the ego out of it. You've put yourself in the chair of the practitioner, and then you're actually trying to solve the problem from their point of view. So that's one of the reasons why I want to bring you on today's program, because one of the big things that we talk about in church and all these resources that we give usually talk about big church or adult church and how to communicate with all the adults in your congregation, your families, etc. And we tend to forget that they're basically little humans running around everywhere. And there's a whole need for resources and learning best practices around there. So Elle, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your business schedule, especially during this season, of coming to help some of our community members here. And the one thing that we came up with, the topic that we basically landed on, I hope is a very, very practical one for all of you watching here today. And that's really the weekly rhythm of church communications for that segment, that ministry front. And so I'm just going to hand over the mic right now to let you give us a peek at what your system actually is, because I think one of the things that people don't realize is that if you actually take a break and walk away from a 50,000 foot point of view, and then look at systems, right, and processes, that actually could really save time as you go forward. And that's one of the things that I love about what you're doing here. So, youth min, kids ministry. That's the question I pitched to her today, and hopefully you'll benefit about seeing what she's talking about in terms of customizable weekly strategy for your church.
Yeah, let's do it. So basically what you're talking about, Kenny, with systems and strategies and processes, you're totally right. That is like the heart of what we do, because you're right. It saves so much time when you can have formulas and structures that you kind of can plug and play with on an ongoing basis. So that's really what we try to do. And so I think my screen is sharing, right?
Okay, let's see. Let's put it up on the screen. There you go.
Now let me minimize this so you can see everything. Can you see my whole screen now, Kenny? Is that looking good?
Yes, we do. We got a couple windows open, so maybe you can maximize that actual window.
Perfect.
To your full screen, because we're seeing your desktop.
There you go. So basically what I thought we could do today is to actually look at one of the resources that we've created for our Grow users, and basically just do kind of a deep dive walkthrough of what this resource looks like. Because if you're familiar or not familiar with our resources, what we like to do is we don't want to just kind of spoon feed you what to do. We want to actually show you the kind of the behind the scenes of how we developed our different processes and strategies and systems, because once you understand how things work, you can tweak it a lot more easily for you and for your particular context. So what we're going to walk through today is actually our social media plan. And when we say social media, we are talking, of course, like traditional social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. But we're also lumping email in there because basically this is a communication plan. So we're going to walk through this, and I'm going to kind of show you how we structure this. And if you're a Grow user, you get all of this and all of the resources to plug in here. If you're not, that's okay. You can just take the strategy and make it work for you. But before we get into that, let's kind of start here, because this will give you a big picture understanding of what we're about to look at. So this particular Excel sheet is what you get inside of Grow Curriculum. It's editable, obviously. And here's kind of how we think about it. This is the student ministry version, by the way. We also have a kids ministry version that's very similar, but we're just looking at the student ministry one just because I decided to. We can look at the kids ministry one, though, if somebody wants to. So here's what we do. First of all, I think when it comes to your social media communication strategy, you have to get really clear on who your audiences are. And so for us, for a youth ministry person, for a kids ministry person, there's really 3 audiences that you need to think about. And sometimes, at least in the youth ministry world, I think we're a little bit guilty of thinking only about students sometimes. We forget that parents exist occasionally, and sometimes we're just not great at communicating with our volunteers. But really, all 3 of those audiences are so important to think about. So for student ministry, you're thinking students, parents, and volunteers. For kids ministry, you are thinking kids, parents, and volunteers as well. So think in those 3 buckets. And we love color coding inside of Grow. If you've ever seen like our annual calendars that a lot of people put together, they're very color coded. So when we go here, you'll see some color coding, but we'll come back to that. So, all right, so you've got to get your 3 audiences down. The next thing you need to think about are your platforms. Now, in this particular resource that we're creating, we are assuming that you're using 4 different platforms. You can use more, you can use fewer, whatever you want to do. This is why this is customizable. But this is kind of our recommendation for communication in youth and kids ministry. So first of all, for parents and volunteers, you really need to send an email. I know a lot of people are like, oh, nobody reads my emails. It's depressing to send an email because then I just have to look at all the people who don't read it. But it really still is like the best way to kind of have a hub of information that you send out to people. And then if you're using something like MailChimp, you can actually generate a URL for that email and share that URL on social media. So you can kind of repurpose that content, get some extra use out of it. So think about email for parents and volunteers. But probably not your students or your kids, because they're probably not checking email. Then if you're thinking about speaking to students, Instagram and Facebook are usually 2 great ways to go. You might want to lump TikTok in there, or maybe not if you're concerned about the future of TikTok, but that could also be an option. And you can also let parents and volunteers know, hey, even though we're going to be talking mostly to teenagers on these platforms, you're still welcome to follow us. Like you are allowed here. It's okay. And then for volunteers, we recommend some kind of closed form of communication. So whether that's a Facebook group or like a group me text message, just depending on how many volunteers you have, some kind of closed group communication system. And then we also recommend a closed Facebook group for your parents. So if you think about those different platforms, those are some different ways to use it. And yeah, just to kind of match up your audience and their needs and their behaviors with the correct platform for them. And by the way, if you're kind of just getting into this and just establishing your social media platforms and rhythms, I would really encourage you to not necessarily follow my advice here exactly, but instead find out where your people actually are and go meet them there. So if they are already really engaged on one particular platform, that's the platform where you should go. It probably won't be MySpace, but maybe it is. Who knows? Can you still get on MySpace, Kenny? Do you know?
Yeah, I think I might have my MySpace page still. I don't know.
Wow, I'm gonna go look for that later. That sounds funny. Okay, so you've got your 3 audiences, your 4 platforms. The next thing we do is we give you options. So we talked about the importance of having a structure, something that you can kind of like mix and match and play with. But you need to have options within it, because if you're doing the exact same thing every single day or every single week, you're going to get bored, and probably your audience is going to get a little bit bored too. And your social media presence is going to be a little too predictable. So I'll show you what this looks like when we go over into this other view in a second. But just know that there is a structure, but you have options within that structure, so it doesn't feel too stagnant. The next thing is to think about daily themes. Now, what I see often, like the mistake I often see with kids and youth ministry, social media presence specifically, is that they tend to lean toward information style posts, which of course is important. You need to keep people in the loop of like events that are coming up and big things that are happening in your ministry. But when we lean so far in that direction, nobody cares anymore because nobody wants to go on Instagram and just be like shouted at with announcements. That's so boring. So we need to kind of think about some different types of communication beyond just information. And the way that we approach that is we have 3 different types. We call them daily themes. There's different ways that you can incorporate this, but the way we do it is by day. So information is one for sure, because you need to communicate information. Second thing though is training, which is like delivering valuable help to your audience that maybe isn't directly connected to, hey, I need you to show up at church, but maybe it's like, devotional content, or for parents, maybe it's like a helpful parenting tip of some kind. Whatever it is, you're giving them some kind of valuable training. And then the third thing is community. So this is just something to highlight and build relationships. This could be highlighting members of your church community. It could be highlighting things that are going on in your actual community outside the walls of your church. But really, this is all about relationships. So those are our 3 daily themes, and you'll see how we rotate through that. And then the last thing is there is done for you content. So I mentioned this before, but when we get into this, you'll see how if you are using Grow, you can plug your curriculum pieces into this plan really easily. If you're using other curriculum, you can do that as well, because a lot of like the major curriculum provide a lot of the same things. Like we might give similar graphics or just different pieces that you can kind of plug and play with. So even if you're not using our curriculum, hopefully this still gives you like a framework you can work with. All right. How are we feeling so far, Kenny? Does that seem good? You want to go into this weekly strategy plan?
Yeah, this is what I love, this nitty-gritty, actually seeing what you've laid out and how it actually, like the reality, right? Mm-hmm. It's not theory.
Yes, exactly. I know theory is great, but let's get down to business sometimes. So here we go. Here is our weekly plan. First of all, let's start up here at the top and look at these daily themes that we talked about. So you'll see we rotate through these things, and we try to rotate through these themes based on like what we think the needs and experiences are of our audiences onto these days. So on Sundays, that's the day people are going to church. And so we made that an information day because people are already thinking about going to church. They're wondering, what's going on at church? What do I need to know? So if you're doing announcements or just kind of church specific information, Sunday is a great day to do it because people are already in church mode. Especially for youth and kids ministry, Wednesday is also one of those days because there's typically some type of Wednesday night gathering. So Sunday and Wednesday are always information types of days. We also put information over here on Saturday sometimes because, Sunday is coming up the next day. It's kind of like Saturday is kind of like a catch-up day where you can kind of put all the information that you didn't have time to post during the week onto Saturday and kind of just play around with it because people are a little bit unpredictable about the way that they interact with social media on Saturdays. So it's kind of a catch-all. But definitely Sundays and Wednesdays for information. Now let's look at training. And remember when we talked about training, what we're talking about here is giving people some helpful information that is going to help them in their spiritual lives, in their parenting, in their roles as volunteers, depending on who you're talking to. So we did that on a Monday because Monday is kind of the beginning of a new week. And sometimes people are struggling on Mondays. I always struggle on Mondays. It is a hard and unpleasant day. So this is a great time to deliver some helpful, inspiring, encouraging content to your people. That's maybe not like, oh, you need to come to church to get the rest. This is giving them actual content where they are. We do that again on Thursday. We do that on Thursday because if you do some kind of Wednesday night service of some kind, you can follow it up on Thursday with something like practical that's maybe connected to what you had talked about on Wednesday. And then the last area that we had talked about is community. And remember, this is something that is highlighting people in your community, that's highlighting stories. And we do those on Tuesdays and Fridays. There's not really a major rhyme or reason for those specific days other than they were, the ones that were still available. So we made those the community days. So that's kind of how we do it. Of course, there are so many ways that you can approach this, and I would encourage you to make this your own and to make this work with the language and rhythms and priorities of your church. But if you don't have something like that, feel free to use this structure. So that's the idea. Then what you'll see down here is you'll see these different platforms that we had talked about. So the first one is email. And the audience for that is your parents and volunteers. Second is your Instagram and Facebook page. And your audience for that would be students and or kids/families. Then you've got a parent Facebook group. Audience, of course, is parents. And your volunteer Facebook or text group, which, of course, is volunteers. And you'll see this color coding system because we love a color code. Alrighty, so that's the big picture structure. Now let's just go day by day and just see how this feels. So Sunday, again, this is going to be an information day. So first thing, send a parent email. For youth and kids ministry, we recommend sending this once a month. Of course, if that is different in your context, like your parents really want to hear from you every week, then go for it. We've just seen that monthly is a good rhythm for the majority of people in our experience. So send that parent email once a month. Then if you're looking at your Instagram and Facebook page, this is where we say these options come in, right? So we want to communicate information here that's relevant to students. So choose from one of these three things. You could maybe post a picture or a video from your Sunday morning service. Like, hey, check out this fun game we played this morning where you had to, students had to stick their feet in kiddie pools full of Jell-O and fish out toy dinosaurs. That was fun. So you can post a picture or video. You can make an announcement about an upcoming event, like, hey, don't forget, next Sunday is the last day to turn in your form for the lock-in. You could also post a worship song or a worship video that's relevant to what you're teaching. Maybe this is something that your worship band actually has performed that you can play. Maybe it ties into your teaching time, or maybe it's just something that you found on the internet that you can repost to your people.
Now, how far in advance do you think most churches can be planning out this content and doing this stuff?
Yeah, so when we recommend, I'll start with our grow recommendation, which is for youth and kids pastors to plan out your entire teaching calendar for the entire year. That is our recommendation. And so I mentioned these grow calendar boards that a lot of folks are posting. Maybe I'll post a link in the comments of this when this is over. But a lot of folks are using this strategy in order to plan this out for the whole year. So you've got your teaching series and your your monthly themes planned out for the whole year in advance. But I would say you could probably, and here I'll say this, it depends if you are creating all of these resources from scratch or if you're using a curriculum that has created some of this content for you. If you are using a curriculum that's created some of this for you, you can do it in much less time, and you can probably do it more in advance because it's right at your fingertips. So if you're using a curriculum, my recommendation is try to plan this out for the month, maybe 2 weeks before the month begins. So right now, churches might be planning this out for whatever their September is going to look like. So that's my recommendation. But, some people like to do things on the fly, like me. I tend to do that sometimes, and it's not the worst case scenario as long as you have a plan. You don't want to do some of these organic things, though, that are specific to your church community. You don't want to plan those too far out in advance, though, because they can become a little bit dated. So just try to keep those a little bit more real time because, they're real people. All right, so that's your Instagram and Facebook page for students or kids. Just as a reminder, we're looking at the student version of this. There's also a kids version that's very similar. All right, then let's look at your parent Facebook group.
And so let me just interrupt there. A lot of churches ask how many accounts should we be spawning because it can get unwieldy.
Yeah.
And does a staff member need to always have eyes on it, or do you suggest volunteers are a good source of labor or management for this stuff?
I love empowering volunteers to do this kind of thing, especially because you've got teenagers and you have college students who can help source a lot of this content. If you're going to do that, though, I would for sure have a staff member just supervising it because, you can get some weird stuff if you're not keeping an eye on it. So I would say, yeah, you can for sure empower, but keep an eye on it. Maybe do a little review.
Great.
Was there another question in there that I forgot to answer?
No, I mean the number of accounts. How having accounts for every single age group. Does that make sense? And then as kids graduate, is the expectation then my middle schooler is no longer a middle schooler, or my elementary kid versus youth? How does that all work?
Yeah, it's a hotly debated subject, Kenny Jahng. You'll find a lot of different opinions on it, which I think is totally fine. I actually think it maybe depends on the size of your church, and it might depend on how your church has approached the branding of their different ministries. Especially right now, it's fairly popular to instead of having different brand names for each of your ministries, to have like your church name students or your church name kids, which is great. And if you're doing that, I think you could probably get away with fewer accounts. But if you are going the more branded ministry approach, which I think is still a valid approach, just depending on your church size, then I would say those different brands might want to have different accounts. Anyway, listen, I can be convinced either way depending on the day.
Yeah. So I guess it's you need intentionality is basically, I think, the answer, right?
Yeah, you need intentionality and consistency. Whatever you're going to do, do it. And don't try to change course midway, because then it just gets weird. But yeah, I think you can get away with either one as long as your whole church is on the same page with it.
Gotcha.
So the parent Facebook group. So it's actually really similar, because those examples we just gave of things that you could post for your students or your kids also work for your parents. It's just a matter of how you deliver it and where you post it. So these same options up here are right down here. But one thing that we added here for parents is one thing you might want to do is to provide a summary of what was taught on Sunday. Whether you're doing student ministry on Sunday or the regular adult service, is maybe just give your parents a little summary of what was going on in case they weren't there, or in case they asked their teenager what they learned and didn't get an answer, which is usually the case. And then for your volunteer Facebook or text group, your volunteers were likely there, so they know what happened, but it could be fun to just post like a fun photo or video of what happened that week, maybe something that's kind of like fun or silly that your volunteers would love, or even highlight a volunteer and celebrate them on social media that day. So that's an example of what a Sunday could look like. So Kenny, you tell me, how detailed do you want to go through all of these things? Do you want to look at every day? Do you want to pick just a few days? What do you prefer?
Yeah, I think I would just choose like one day and walk through it, because I do think that and again, I believe all the resources are available at your site. We have a link that we had on the screen before. I think it's churchcommunications.com/grow. And there's tons of other resources there besides just what we're showing here today.
There are.
I actually think I don't know what you call it, that video with you and Kenny where you go through the calendar on the wall. I think that's one of those things where it's almost like a altar call where people go, hallelujah. And you might see some outer body experiences when people see that video on your site.
Yeah.
I know I did.
It's pretty wonderful. And I thought I had a picture of it. I don't have a picture of the board handy, but we do make these little cards now.
Yes.
So you don't have to like cut out or create your own cards, but you'll see all this color coding here. The way we do it is red is our teaching strategy, orange is discipleship, yellow is like games and fun programming stuff, green is events, blue is volunteers, you'll see that here, and pink is for parents, which you'll see here. So everything's color coded. Yeah, people do like this, and we like it too. It really helps visualize your whole year. It's really wonderful. But that's just one of those gifts to the churches that have adopted your system. Now, one question I have about that system and even some of this is how customizable really is this? Do we need to like go all in and adopt your entire worldview of how to do all this stuff, or is there any flexibility at all? Oh my goodness, there's so much flexibility. Basically, our strategy is, listen, you know your church best. You do whatever you want. we're here to give you all of the resources you could possibly need, but you don't use the ones you don't want. Use the ones you do. Mix things up, change things around. So every resource we give you is totally editable. Like, for example, I hate Excel sheets, guys. I think they are so ugly. It is almost painful for me to show this to you. But the reason we give it to you in an Excel sheet is because it's 100% editable. So you're like, oh, tell a story? Like, cool. I'm going to talk about Jim this week and how awesome he is. So the idea here is just to make it super simple for you to edit and customize all of these things. And yeah, make it your own. And like I said, we have a lot of people who use some of our strategy, but they use different curriculum, they use different resources. And that's okay with us because we're trying to teach a strategy to make leaders not totally lose their minds on a regular basis. And so if you can use our strategy and combine it with other resources, that's cool too. We're just trying to give you something helpful that helps you stay sane because ministry is hard.
So here's another question, like, many times you might, and again, you know what's best for your own ministry, but many times if you're in a little bit of a mid-sized or larger church, there is some standardization of the entire brand, and there might be a communications team or department, a director or pastor. How do you tackle that where, right, there's this tension of having autonomy and saying what you need to do, and sometimes basically the central team will say, no, you can't just talk all about that. You need to promote our upcoming sermon series, which has nothing to do, like the elementary school students have no idea or care about what the sermon series is for the month. But so how do you, can you talk about that? Like, this is a great encapsulated system. But there is some reality that, for lack of a better word, I almost feel like, we're a family here today. There are outside forces that somehow come and try to mess up the beauty that we've done in our own ministry front, right?
That's totally right. That's totally correct. So, okay, yeah, listen, again, that's the reason why we make this editable, right? Because we know that there's crazy stuff that happens that we can't control. So listen, if that's like a recurring situation in your ministry where like, hey, probably once a week, I'm going to be asked to post something that was not in my plan, probably what I would do is I would insert a row and just be like, name it, I don't know, church announcements or something, and just keep that place handy. Keep it blank so that you can fill things in. Because really, like, when it comes to social media, like, you can post multiple times a day for the most part, and it's not gonna kill you. You'll be fine. What I would caution people against is, like, let's say your church is asking you to post certain things or do certain things. That's cool. But I think the danger that we can run into is not balancing that with our own fresh strategic content. So if your church is asking you to post things like the sermon series update, whatever, do it. But don't do it at the expense of your other things. Just post more than once a day if you have to. So that's kind of how I would get around it. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes you gotta post stuff, but also you could keep good track of, like, the analytics, because if your church is always asking you to do a certain thing and you're doing it, like, do it faithfully, do it to the best of your ability. And then you're like, listen, these horrible graphics for the women's brunch that you're asking me to post on my youth ministry account are not getting any likes. Can I please stop? Please. So maybe just have some data available. That could be your friend.
That is a very good piece of advice. Yeah. So let's dive into just one or two extra pieces here. Like, so, how many people do you think actually are needed to execute a strategy like this? Because this seems like, from the outside point of view, if I don't know social media, this looks like a lot, right? This looks like a very complicated plan. And the one thing we usually say is, like, the last thing a church worker needs is to be put on the treadmill of death of content production. So how do you, what's the practicality of executing like this?
Yeah, so we like to think about things in terms of levels, right? Like we just put out these online hacks, for example, of how to take our curriculum and make it work for an online environment. And the way that we've communicated that is like, listen, there's going to be 3 levels and you get to choose whatever level you want. And there is nothing inherently good or bad about your level of engagement. If you're at level 1, maybe you're doing something super simple that only takes like an hour a week to do. If you are going all in on level 3, you have tons of time, you've got resources, you've got people. That's great. But there's nothing inherently good or bad about either of those levels. The point is you just need to find the level that works for you and do it. So what we try to do with this strategy in particular is to give you the most complicated version, knowing that you can delete things. So if you're like, listen, this sounds nice, but I do not want a parent Facebook group. Look, it's gone. Now you don't have to think about it anymore. So I would say like the lowest common denominator here is probably these 2 rows right here, which is sending an email to your parents once a month, sending an email to volunteers once a week, and maintaining an Instagram or Facebook page, depending on what your audience, what works for your audience. I would probably say an Instagram page is going to be best for kids and students, but it's up to you. So yeah, I would say this is where you want to start. And if you want to get fancy and start adding these other rows, then do it. But you don't have to. Do what you want. That's what I'd say.
I love that advice. It is classic, Elle, but it is true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of those things where I think sometimes you need a little bit more confidence that if you have something with intentionality and strategy, and that it actually is, you have backup for while you're doing things. Sometimes, you should have that little bit of extra confidence.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. And I think also just in a general piece of advice too, is to think about how to repurpose content when it comes to your social media presence. A lot of times when people are trying to strategize their social media, they are trying to like create brand new content every day for every post. And you really don't need to do that, because if you can think a little bit more strategically about what you're doing, it's actually pretty easy to repurpose things across different platforms and use them in different ways. So for example, let's say you write a really awesome parent email, and let's say it is full of, there's a really cool link to an article in there that you want your parents to read. There's a great video that you put in there. There's some announcements and stuff. All of that information that was in this parent email, you can take and you can pull apart and then basically copy and paste into different places. So like that announcement you made, maybe you want to paste it over here Thursday in your parent Facebook group. So you don't have to create all of this content brand new every single time. If you can just think strategically about, what have I already done? What have I already created? What's already at my fingertips? And how do I just push that out in different ways at different times? That makes
great advice. Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? If someone wanted to really dive into this and start to adopt this approach, what's the best way they can learn more about Grow and all the things that you are doing?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. First of all, they can go to that link that you shared, which I think was churchcommunications.com/grow. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's put that on the screen here.
Cool. So head there. One of the best things that you can look at on that website for kind of your first taste is there is a planning meeting on that page that is the video that you were mentioning, Kenny, where my Kenny, different Kenny, my Kenny
Yes.
and I walk you through the entire Grow strategy on the calendar. So the whole color-coded card situation, we plan out an entire year together and also show you how to customize it, because we love customization, as if you couldn't tell. So that's a great place to start. You can also jump into our Facebook group if you would like to. We have one for youth and one for kids. If you search for Stuff You Can Use, you'll find 2 Facebook groups, and you're welcome to come join and ask some questions and hang out.
Yeah, and one of the things I love is that you are so accessible, both of you guys, and I think that's just, I love it. I love everything that you guys are doing. This, I think, has shown some people, hopefully, that there is a place in the world to be a youth worker and have sanity at the same time.
Yeah.
Those are not mutually exclusive worlds.
That's right.
And I think the lesson to be learned here, honestly, is systems, right? Having systems set up in advance really allows you to have guardrails, but then also freedom within those guardrails. And again, I can't say it enough. That thing that she's showing on the screen with these cards, actually, can you just go to your homepage on a browser as you share, just so that they can see? Because I think on your homepage you have that video, right? Like you actually.
Let's see. Let me do a new tab here. Nope. Let me do a new window. Hold on. I got too many things sharing here. Here, let me do this. This works. All right, we're gonna go to growcurriculum.org.
And I think the hero, yep, that's it. So everyone needs to go to that website. It's on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. You go to the same site, churchcommunications.com/grow. And then you need to play that video. Now, that video is not a YouTube video that's 3 minutes long.
No.
It's actually something. So how long is that video? How long should they set aside?
I think it's 40 minutes. It's a 40-minute guy. But if you, go ahead.
It's meant to be like a team resource, right?
Yes. So it's also right here. This will take you to it. So it's 39 minutes. And yeah, we basically lead a planning meeting for you. So you can do it on your own or you can do it with your team. But all these different colors on the board represent different areas of ministry. And so the planning meeting is in 6 sections and we walk you through each one. We say, okay, right now we're going to plan all of our teaching strategy for the year. So let's do it. And we walk you through it, tell you what to do where, but also say, hey, guess what? These cards are all movable. So move them around, do what you want. And then we just go through every area of ministry. So we do that in 40 minutes. This is like a more abbreviated version of what is included in Grow Curriculum. If you just want like a quicker taste of what that is, that's 9 minutes. You can see some of the things that are included if you scroll down there. But yeah.
Sean Lee is asking, is there a way to get the social media plan somewhere? Where can I download it? And I guess it's at the same place, right?
Yeah, so I think, I'm actually trying to remember if we have a free, a free trial. I'm trying to remember if it's in our free trial or not. If it's not, I will just give it to you, Sean. So you just let me know. But yeah, go here, you get a month of stuff. So it is like a full 4-week series with everything that's typically included. It's not like a light version of any of the resources. It's like a full-on month of all the things.
Gotcha. Derek says, yes, repurpose, take one piece of large content and break it up into smaller chunks for different mediums. Good advice. Now, you kind of showed it to us in action instead of just telling us the strategy. Mm-hmm. Are there any, there's tons of places to do this. Can you share just, if someone really hasn't been doing that with their content, is there any other easy, low-hanging fruit places that they could utilize it or just walk through just one quick example of taking one piece of large content and breaking up into smaller chunks for different mediums?
Yeah. Let's see. You want to do a grow specific example?
Sure. Yeah.
So we do try to make this easy for you to do. Actually, did I open one of these already? Yeah. Okay. So Squat Up, for example, is one of our series. It's the series that a lot of our churches are doing right now. And so one of the things that we do here is within like every week of curriculum, there is a big idea for that week. It's kind of like the summary of the truth of that week of teaching. And it's a phrase that we repeat a ton in the sermons. And just that one simple phrase is something that you can repurpose in a lot of ways. So we provide a volunteer communication plan, parent and student volunteer communication plan. So we've repurposed those big ideas down here into just like little mini bite-sized captions that you can post. But also if you go into the different weeks, let's see, our graphics and video folder, we create graphics of all of the big ideas as well. And so even if you're not using Grow, you can still do this with whatever your message is. Whatever your big idea is for your talk that week, just make it into a bunch of different graphics. We do a horizontal and a square and a vertical version. Or even, so we create bumper videos. You might create bumper videos, or your church might, for your different series. And, typically you'll just post them, or you'll just play them during your service, but also you can post them on social media as like a fun teaser of, hey, this series is coming out. So really anything that you're creating, I would encourage you to figure out how and where can I repost this somewhere, because I already made it and I want to use it for more than just one thing.
Is it okay to take old content? Like, does it have to be something that we're producing now? Like, what?
Yeah.
Sometimes I talk to churches, and if I'm coaching a church, it takes a couple months, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, like 2 years ago, we created all this content." I'm like, "That's a treasure chest.
Yes.
Why haven't you said that before?"
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Oh, yes. Oh my goodness. Oh man. And actually, so our team at Stuff You Can Use, we're currently like, okay, we need to figure out how to do this better, because we have this like gigantic archive. We've been doing curriculum this is our 4th year of curriculum we've been producing. And we're like, we just have this gigantic like treasure trove of things we've made. So we need to figure this out. So one of the things that we are trying to do is to actually create kind of an archive of things that we can reuse and repurpose. That might be like going through old sermons and pulling out important quotes that we've liked. It could be, let's see. Oh, actually in kids ministry, one thing that we do that's cool is, let me see if I can back up here and find it. You guys are just seeing my whole desktop right now, so hope you're enjoying that. We do these sign language videos. So when we have a memory verse every month for kids, and one of the things, nope, not that one. One of the things we do is we create these videos of the sign language versions of each of the memory verses. And friends, like if you're doing something like that, I don't know if you've noticed, but you know, Bible verses don't really go out of date. You can reuse those. So if you're creating like a graphic or a video or something like that of a memory verse, or just any verse that you love that had to do with your message, that's like timeless content that you can just repurpose. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that you can do. Yeah, dig deep, find all the good things you've made and reuse it. Give it some new life.
Thank you so much. That gives us a little bit of inspiration and a lot of tactical, practical knowledge that we can take and use right now. I really appreciate the time. I will say that your Instagram feed is great. Your Twitter feed sometimes is even better, but your handles are different.
They are.
Can you just share with everybody how to get in touch with you? If someone watching today just wanted to follow up and actually give you some kudos and thanks for all the stuff that you've shared today,
yes.
What's the best way to do that?
Well, if you don't want to deal with the complications of following me, you can follow Stuff You Can Use. That one's easier, and that's the same on every platform. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, which is where most of my rants will take place, and snarky remarks, you can find me at Elle with 11 L's, 11 L's, and then another E. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram, which is where you get rants plus food pictures, you know, then you can follow me there at Elle with 18 L's. It's a little harder to find me there, but you can do it.
Well, wherever it is, it's worth following you. Thank you so much for being with us today, and have a really good rest of the week. We got to have you back sometime soon to share some of the other components of your system. And the last question is, people are going back to school in soon. Mm-hmm. Is this the time they should be thinking about the calendar, that whole growth system and the planning and stuff? Just what's the sweet spot? What are you seeing from churches? Yeah. When should they actually be like sitting down, blocking out time for themselves?
Sure. I would say definitely the majority of our Grow friends are doing this in August and January of every year. Those are kind of like the two most popular months, but we actually get people doing this basically every month of the year. And you can see that if you're in our Facebook group, just at least once a month, somebody will be like, hey, look, I just made my board. It's October, a very random month to do this, but I finally did it. So really you can start at any time. Just whenever you have the brain space to plan out the upcoming year of ministry, do it. Sooner is better.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Elle. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on. And we'll be back next week for another edition of the Webinar Wednesday. We want you to let us know what are the types of resources you want to learn more about, who you want to hear from, what are the topics that you feel like either you or your teams, we're hearing that some of you are watching this simultaneously with other teams and discussing it afterwards. And that's the perfect way to use this space. So give us your feedback. We want your feedback, and we'll be here next week on the Webinar Wednesday. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time here in the Church Communications Group.